Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. Tonight is called Sip and Learn. So sit back, get you a glass, and don't get a whole bottle now. Just get a glass and come on back here and learn. Talk Leadership with Cedrick starts right now. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Leadership with Cedrick. Everybody needs a little TLC, and I am Cedrick LaFleur, your host, and I want to be with you tonight for about an hour. And again, the theme for tonight is Sip and Learn. Talk Leadership with Cedrick is where we focus on leadership, personal growth with business leaders and educators and local thought leaders. Our goal is to introduce our audience to leaders who are making an impact with innovative ideas. Our guiding leadership principle is the law of contribution, which says growing yourself enables you to grow others. So you can't give what you don't have. So first, you must grow yourself in order to grow others. And we believe that outstanding leaders like yourself can help us help others. So tonight, folks, we have another dynamic leader. In fact, this is his second time on the show, and I'm excited to have him back on the show, Mr. Mark Smits. So let's welcome Mark to the show.
Thank you, Cedrick. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So, every night, folks, I like to do a proper introduction of our guests. And so let me do a proper introduction of Mark Smits. Now, Mark and I worked together at Abbott for many years. In fact, I worked on Mark's teams, a couple of Mark's teams during our time at Abbott together. Mark is a talented and insightful senior executive with over 30 years of experience in Fortune 500 companies within the medical diagnostics industry. Now, Mark started off at Texas A&M, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in building construction. And then he went on to serve in the United States Army in the Corps of Engineers in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and he was an officer in the 299th Engineer Battalion. For over 25 years, Mark promoted through the ranks in Abbott Laboratories with increasing responsibility, with Abbott Diagnostics with increasing responsibility, beginning in field sales and culminating in his retirement as a divisional vice president. Mark then went on to take his talents to Fisher Healthcare, and he was vice president of marketing and business development. And then he went to Neogenomics Laboratory, and he was vice president of sales and marketing. See here, senior executive level, folks. That's the type of people we bring on the show. And then he rounded out his working career with Quadell Corporation, where he was a senior vice president. So again, we're excited to have Mark Smits here. And tonight, Mark is going to be talking. He is now the president, CEO, founder, executive chair for Desperado Wines, right? Or maybe his wife is those and he's just the worker. So Mark, I'm excited to have you on the show tonight.
Well, Cedrick, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And after all of those accolades, I am now just a humble farmer, and that's what I do pretty much most of the year, is just make sure that my grapevines grow.
Well, that is awesome. So, Mark, it's interesting. You're in healthcare, your career, and then you retire. And you decide that, hey, you know what? I'm going to get some grapes and I'm going to grow and I'm going to get me a vineyard and I'm going to make wine. So what made you, what helped you make that decision to start a vineyard?
Okay, so Cedrick, I'm still a relatively young man. I'm only 63 years old, and I retired in 2015. And I knew I still had lots of gas in the tank. And the other thing that I've always tried to live my life by is I think that your best leaders are curious people, and they're always trying to learn something about themselves and about other projects and other things. And so I knew that I wanted to do something with this piece of property that we have. This piece of property I bought in 2005, and it's been a real blessing for our family. It's been a central gathering point, but I knew that I could make more of it. And my wife, Missy, has always been in landscape design, so she's got a green thumb. And so she was the one that suggested that we plant a vineyard. And I thought about it and I said to myself, man, that is a very cool idea because that's going to keep me active physically. And it's something I've never ever done before. So it's gonna keep me active mentally as well. And so I bought in hook, line, and sinker, and it all started back in the fall of 2015.
Wow. So, so I guess I was right. The wife is the person that's in charge of the vineyard, and you're the farmer.
Well, so I kid with my family, my friends, that I have the same number of departments that any large Fortune 500 company would have. I have a marketing department, I have a shipping department, I have accounts payable, I've got accounts receivable, I've got all the departments. Unfortunately, I don't have all the people. I just have one person who's in charge of all of those. So some days I'm in the shipping department, some days I'm in the marketing department, some days I'm in the product acquisition department. So yeah, I'm a one-man show.
Okay, all right. Well, that's awesome. And the beautiful thing is when you're doing your own thing, it's not like it's a job, right? It's not working really. It's just it's in your passion. So you may not have the same tiredness that you have when you work in a 9 to 5 for someone else, right?
Well, Cedric, I've heard you say in a lot of your shows that you need to enjoy what you're doing. And I was blessed to have a career for 35 years where I really enjoyed what I did. And I enjoyed the people that I worked with, and I enjoyed the mission that we had. But yes, that's certainly true. When you start your own business, if you find something that you're passionate about, then it really isn't work at all. It's a hobby. And to me, this is a hobby. And I would tell you that I'm 5 years into it, and I still feel like I've got an infinite amount of knowledge that I can learn. This could go on for years, and every year that goes by, I'll become a better grape grower, and I'll certainly become a better winemaker. So it's an ongoing process, and it is a principle that I absolutely believe in, and that is, you have to like what you're doing, and you have to stay curious. You have to keep working on trying to get better at what you do.
Sure, absolutely. I love that. So it's Desperado Wines is the name,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
All right.
Desperado. Yep. Hmm.
Desperado. All right. And so I'm going to ask you a little bit here. How did you decide on that name? But before I go there, so I understand you have 4 different types of wines today.
Yes. So when we planted the vineyard, we wanted to plant a red grape and a white grape. And I need to tell you, Cedric, that before this started, I knew nothing about the wine business. I knew nothing about wine. I grew up a beer drinker, and it was only until really 2010 and beyond that I even tasted wine. So I didn't know anything. But we knew we wanted to have a red grape and a white grape, and it's amazing what you can do with those 2 grapes. And both of our grapes, by the way, are a Spanish variety. Our white grape is Blanc de Bois, and our red grape is Spanish Lenoir. And the reason that we have those grapes is because those are the grapes that will grow in Texas, where we live. Believe it or not, there are over 5,000 types of grapes that are made into wine.
Oh,
And
wow.
most Americans are used to probably a 2 dozen because that's what's grown in California, and that's what everybody, or in Washington or in Oregon, that's what people are used to. Merlot and Shiraz and Cabernet and Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio. I mean, those are the ones that that people are familiar with and comfortable with, and they taste great. But in Texas, I can't grow those types of grapes. They require a cool evening. They have a longer growth cycle. So we ended up growing these Spanish grapes, and the growing season is actually really short here in Texas. My grapes pretty much come to life in the middle of March, and we're harvesting in July. and they grow fast when they're growing. They love the heat. They don't like the humidity so much, but they love the sunshine, they love the heat, and they grow well. So we have these two grapes, red and a white, and so we knew we wanted to make a white wine, and we knew we wanted to make a red wine. Over the last 5 to 6 years, I've really consumed a lot of rosé wine because we've got friends that really like rosé, and so we decided to make a rosé wine. And then our fourth wine is a blend of two red grapes. It's the grape that we grow in our vineyard, and a grape that grows in Chile. And the grape that grows in Chile is called a Carmenera grape. And you're probably asking, why Carmenera? Well, it's because Missy and I were on a cruise, and we stopped at a couple of ports in Chile, and we had their national wine, which is made out of Carmenera grapes, and we loved it. So we said to ourselves, if we're gonna make a wine, let's buy some of these Carmenera grapes and throw them in with our grapes and see what happens. And so that's what we did. So a white, a rosé, and two reds.
Wow. So with this blended grape, is there something that is this a grape that you can just readily buy I don't know if it's a seed or something, or do you have to manufacture that blended?
Well, so we grow the Spanish Lenoir grape and the Blanc de Bois grape in our vineyard. Our vineyard was planted in the January of 2017. So we've 17, 18, 19, and 20. So we've had 4 growing seasons. Last summer when we harvested, we probably harvested about 8 tons of grapes, probably about 4 tons of red grapes and 4 tons of white grapes, something like that. I have a record of it, but roughly that's correct. And then we can't grow Carmenera grapes here because, again, it's just not the right weather conditions. And so, this is one of the many things that I've learned over this journey, is that there's a company on the East Coast that imports grapes from all around the world, and you can buy those grapes from these different companies, and they actually will ship the grapes to you. Our Carmenera grapes arrive frozen, and then we thawed them out, and we started the winemaking process with them.
Wow. Okay. All right. See, folks, this is what I want to do tonight, is help you understand the winemaking process, help you understand Mark's thought process for deciding to grow a vineyard, and then you're going to learn something about a little bit more about wine versus just drinking. And now you have a little bit more education and great conversation piece, right? So help us understand. Mark, well, actually, you already told us about the types of the grapes that you have. Now, in Texas, you said that there's only a few kinds of grapes that can be grown here. So when you started, did you have a mentor for this, or did you just have to do some trial and error on your own?
Yeah. So this is another one of the things that I've listened to you talk about. I've really been blessed that I have 2 really huge assets that I've leaned on really heavily on this whole journey. The first asset's available to everybody, and that's Texas A&M. Texas is an agricultural state. I mean, we also obviously have a lot of other things going for us, but ranching and farming is a big part of Texas. And Texas A&M is the agricultural school. And I did not know this until I got started, but A&M is actually paying for experts to help farmers. And so it's a no charge to the farmer. I mean, we as taxpayers are paying for it, but the state of Texas has 4 vineyard experts. They've divided the state into 4 subdivisions, and so the lady that works in Southeast Texas has been to my property a number of times. I have her text number or cell phone number. I mean, I've exchanged countless pictures with her, saying, what is going on here? And she immediately responds and tells me what to do. So that's available to everybody, and it's a great tool. It's a great asset. Every county in Texas also has an agricultural specialist. So if I have any questions about fertilizer or about soil conditions, I mean, there's just an infinite amount of assets and resources available to people that want to try agriculture in the state of Texas. And then the second asset I have is I've got a friend from school who lives about 30 miles away from my property. His name is Pat Hale and his wife Karen, and they own Engedi Vineyards. They have a wine tasting room in Calvert, Texas, which is just north of College Station. And so Pat and Karen started their vineyard probably about 3 or 4 years before I did. And Pat and I went to school together. And so Pat's been a huge asset to me. He has helped me every step of the way. He's helped me from setting up and organizing the vineyard to how to raise the grapes to the equipment that I need for the winemaking. I mean, he's just been a huge mentor for me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We have a question from an audience member. It says, "Hey, do you grow sweet wine, or do you sell sweet wines?" And we're going to be posting his link here shortly. Actually, it's scrolling across the screen, but I'm going to put it in the chat as well, so you can copy and paste it and go to his website.
Yeah, so I see the question, and we sell all of our wine right now through the internet. I mean, believe it or not, there's over 460 wineries in the state of Texas. And so I think that most people that live in Texas are familiar with the Fredericksburg area in the Hill Country. It's kind of become a little bit of our Napa Valley. There's a lot of boutique wineries in and around Fredericksburg, and they all have wine tasting rooms. And it's a really fun experience if you're in Central Texas to go visit Fredericksburg. And then here's the other thing that's going on in Texas now is there's a lot of cotton farmers up in the panhandle of Texas that are realizing that they can make a lot more money growing grapes than they can growing cotton. And if you think about it, the fabrics that most of us wear now are becoming more and more synthetic, and there's less and less need for cotton. And so these folks are converting to vineyards. And an interesting thing about the panhandle climate is that it's more like California, so they can actually grow some of the California grapes in the panhandle, which is kind of cool. So we're located in College Station, Texas. We're about 40 miles west of College Station. If you drew a line between College Station and Austin, we're pretty much right on that line, and we're pretty much halfway in between College Station and Austin. And then let me answer the last question, or the other question that she mentioned, which is, do I have any sweet wine? And the answer is no. Missy and I, my wife and I, as we entered into this journey of tasting wine and what wines do we like and what wines don't we like, we both gravitated towards dry wines. And so all 4 of our wines are dry. I can explain more about the difference between dry and sweet wine, but our wine has no sugar in it. It has fruit flavor in it, but it doesn't have any sugar in it.
Okay, all right. And folks, I have the link. It's scrolling across the screen, but I also put it in the chat so you can copy and paste and go to his website and check out the different types of wine. So one of them is called Splendo Top Blanc Du Bois wine, right?
Yeah, Spindle Top. So let me just talk about that a second, Cedrick. This is the white wine. It's a very dry, very light white wine. It's the Blanc du Bois berry. So you asked about the name Desperado. Missy and I were in Sacramento going to a 2-day class on how to make wine at the University of California, Davis, which we thought to ourselves, if you're going to learn how to make wine, why not go to Napa Valley to learn how to do it? And UC Davis is a great place. But because we're in Texas, and because there's a great Hispanic legacy in Texas, we decided to do things with our wine. The first thing we wanted to do is stay true to a Spanish theme. So Descarado is Spanish for brash or brazen, and so when you're thinking about a label for your wine, you also have to think about names that aren't being used by other wine manufacturers. So Descarado is unique. It's we were able to get it trademarked, and so that's why we went with Descarado, because it's brash or brazen, and we thought that kind of describes how most Texans feel about Texas. And so then the second thing that we did is we decided to stick with iconic Texas imagery for our different labels. So the white wine is named after Spindletop. Spindletop was the first oil gusher that was discovered down in Beaumont. So you can see our label has all of the old oil derricks on it. But I don't think it takes too long for people in the United States, when they think about Texas, to think about oil. Mm-hmm. And so we went with Spindletop. Our rosé is called Chisholm Trail, and as soon as you quit thinking about oil in Texas, you start thinking about cattle in Texas. And the Chisholm Trail was one of the super highways to get cows up to Kansas to go to the market. And then our Carmenera Lenoir blend is called Alamo Blend. So obviously, most people that think about Texas also think about the Alamo. So
before you go, let me ask you this: Natasha Haas, who is also I think she's retired now from Abbott, but she said it's on the screen, what kind of grapes are in the blend?
Yeah, so I don't have any of this available right now because I'm in it. I've still got over 60 gallons of it, but I'm going to put it in oak barrels. But this is the wine that is 60% the Chilean Carmenera grape, and 40% are Spanish Lenoir grapes. And so they've been blended together, and I've gotten very positive reviews about this wine. But most red wines take at least a year of aging before most people will sell them. So I only bottled a couple of cases of this to give it a try. The rest of it will be available probably in the fall after it sits in an oak barrel for about 7 more, 8 more months.
Awesome. And one of our good friends, Tim Screen, said, great show. He and Joni had their first chilled bottle of Blanc du Bois last night, and they really enjoyed the dryness and crispness of it. Well,
there you go.
You're watching.
So Cedrick, it's interesting to learn about the earth and soil and growing, and our Blanc grapes. Well, all of our grapes were planted in what used to be 25 or 30 years ago a watermelon patch, and I have had a number of people from Texas A&M tell me that part of the taste and aroma that they get from our white is because of the watermelon, I guess, that was grown on the land years and years and years ago. I don't know. I don't know how factual that is, but when you open up the bottle of our white, you can definitely smell a very citrus type of smell.
Okay, awesome. It's always good, folks, to learn a little bit more about anything that you're consuming, but definitely about wine, because there are so many people that are wine drinkers. So we're excited to be talking to Mark Smits tonight about Descarado wines. So continue asking your questions. So, Mark, I know that you probably, maybe you don't have a favorite, but I'm going to ask anyway. What's your favorite of those wines and why?
So I'll start by just saying this about it. I've had a number of people try the wine while it was still in the fermentation tanks. And this was, just after we started making it, and it was fermenting and growing and becoming wine. And I probably have had an equal amount of people like each of the four different types. And so that just it just shows you that as if you're going to consume wine, if you find a wine that you really like, then that's the most important thing about wine tasting is find a wine that you like. It's interesting because a, a a a singular type of wine will taste different for different people. Some people may like one kind of wine, and another person standing right next to them might not like it as much. With that said, uh, of the wines that I've made so far, uh, the alum. I'm a red. I typically like red wine more than rosé or white, and I really like the way this Alamo blend is turning out. And I was just down at the winery last week, and I tasted our other red wine, and it's really starting to come into shape too, and I like it a lot too. Um, so I would say Alamo blend is probably my favorite, and then followed by the rosé. I really like the rosé too. And
Okay.
Missy's favorite is the white. She really thinks that we've got something special with the white, and we'll see. So that's her favorite.
Okay. That is awesome. So, um, I know right now you have four types,
Yeah.
four different types. Long term, is there plans for more flavors, types?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm still with you, right, Cedric?
Yes, I'm serious. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because you froze up on your screen a little bit. Okay,
Okay.
so Cedric, when Missy and I went out to UC Davis a couple of years ago to go to this class, I mean, one of the very first things the instructor told us was that there's an art and a science to making wine, and the science is universal. And honestly, making wine is really pretty easy. If you start with really good grapes, and then all you really have to add to that is yeast, and the yeast will turn the sugar in those grapes into wine. The yeast turns the sugar into alcohol, and so the juice turns from grape juice to wine. And I mean that is it. That's the science of it. You start with grape juice, and the grapes have sugar in it. You add yeast, and the yeast converts the sugar to alcohol, and voila, you have wine.
Fine.
Um, Now the art part of and so the science part is there are basic steps that every winemaker follows because that's the science of it. So for instance, um, what's the difference between rosé wine and a red wine? Um, they use exactly the same grapes. So why is one light red and the other one dark red? Well, it's really simple. When we ferment the rosé wine, we have squeezed all the juice out of the berries, and we throw the skins away. So all that's being converted here is the red grape juice that's come from the red grapes. We add yeast to it, and it changes from grape juice to wine. Now, with the red wine, the process is a little bit different. You don't you don't squeeze the grapes, and you don't take the grape juice out of the grapes. You take the stems off the grapes, but then you just throw the grapes and whatever juice from the broken berries and all the skins, and you just all of that in a tank, and you add yeast to that. And what changes the color from this light red to this dark red is all the skins that are left in the tank during the fermentation process for the red wine. And that's really the difference. That's the science. So, so Cedrick, you asked what's next, and this is the art part. And I'm really excited about it. Missy and I were up in Indiana last week visiting our grandkids, and we went out with some friends to a winery in Indianapolis. Like I said, you can grow wine, you can grow grapes anywhere, and so there was this. And this particular winemaker at this particular winery, he added a small amount of carbonation to his white wine, and
Wow.
it was awesome. So it wasn't so much carbonation that it turned it into a champagne. It was just a hint of carbonation that it gave kind of a feeling that you were drinking like a bubbled water or something like that. And so, next year I'm gonna give that a shot. I'm gonna take some of this white wine and I'm gonna add some carbonation, and we'll come up with a fifth type of wine. So it's that kind of thing that you can kind of experiment with and have different things come up, and you can try different things. We probably next will also take some of the Carbonera grapes that we're buying, and we probably add some of the Carbonera grapes to our Lenoir grapes to make a blended rosé. So we'll try that as well. So
Wow.
it's fun. You can really become a mad scientist when it comes to doing different things to make different kinds of wines.
So, Mark, what I want you to do is, and I see Joe Nimmers has said, hey, he's already bought him 2 bottles of white wine.
I know. I thank you, Joe, for that. I appreciate that, and I hope you enjoy it. I think you will, based on what I've heard from other folks.
Yes. Now,
Don't drink all.
Go ahead.
Don't drink both bottles at the same time.
Exactly what I was going to say. Don't drink both bottles at the same time and then go buy a 3-wheel motorcycle now. So, Mark, I'm smiling because I'm thinking about, all right, last time you were on the show, we talked about your leadership book, and we saw the pictures of you being the young A&M Corps, and what is the Corps Cadets?
Corps Cadets, yep.
Right. And so while you're talking, I'm thinking, I said, now, I wonder if back then when he was in his 20s, if someone said, when you're in your 60s, you're going to grow and develop wines, what would you have thought back then? Cedrick,
in my 20s, that was so far off the radar screen that it was like it would have been a different planet for me to think about being a winemaker. Cedrick, 10 years ago, if somebody would have told me that I was going to be a farmer and a winemaker, I would have laughed at them. But I know you believe this because I've watched enough of your interviews that I know what's important to you, and I've told you this to you this before. A lot of the things that you talk about are also things that are very important to me. I think it's really critical to continue your education even after you've been formally educated. I think it's really important to be curious about things and try to learn new things. Hey, Cedrick, there's some chemistry involved in winemaking, believe it or not. I have to know how much acid, I have to know how much sugar. And Cedrick, when I was at A&M, I used to cross the street to stay as far away from the chemistry building as I could get. So when I had to start doing chemistry, it was, and some of my friends who have watched me with my chemistry set would probably tell you that I'm still not a very good chemist, but I've learned some chemistry. I think that's really important. And then I've also heard you talk about, some principles to guide your life by, and I think you've talked about being patient, and I think you've talked about working hard, and failure is going to happen, and you have to grind your way through all of that. And I can tell you that in the last 4 years, I've developed an enormous respect for the people that provide the food to us in the United States and around the world, because there's nothing like cooperating with Mother Nature. She is going to have her way, and sometimes you are smart enough to get under her umbrella and cooperate with her. And I can tell you, in 2018, after I had a successful year of growing grapes in 2016, I got a little cocky. I thought I had it all figured out. Mother Nature said, "Son, you have a lot to learn." And I lost all my red grapes in 2017. No, I'm sorry, 2018. I had a really good crop in 2017. I lost all of my red grapes in 2018 to a fungus, and it was totally preventable. But I just wasn't paying close enough attention. I got, I thought that I was on top of it, and I wasn't. And Mother Nature reminded me in a very hard way that I had a lot to learn. So those are the kind of things that cause this to be fun for me. It hasn't been perfect along the way. It has had a lot of challenges. I'm going to leave you with one more thing on this particular subject. I am unbelievably thankful for the help I've received along the way on this journey. I'm really blessed by having a fantastic family and fantastic friends. And and there's been so many hands that have been involved in this journey that I can't even. It would take me an hour just to name all the people that helped me along the way. And even now, I'm happy to report that if I put out an email to my friend group and say, "Hey, I need some help on such and such weekend," that I always get more volunteers than I actually need. And so none of this would have happened if it hadn't have been for this community that is interested in helping, and I'm very thankful for that. And I know you've talked about that too, the strength of the community and the strength of having a mentor and the strength of giving back. And I've experienced all of that in the last 4 years.
Wow, and that is awesome. And Mark, that's a great tie-in to what we do here on Talk Leadership with Cedrick, is tie everything back to leadership, to our experiences, and not just our experiences, but evaluated experiences, right? Because what you learn from that time in 2018 when you lost your crop, right? That was an experience that now you're going to be able to lean on to help you go forward. Probably helped you in 2019 and in 2020 and going forward. And in this space, folks, what I want you to make sure that you take away from this is, Mark said he had some failure along the way. Yes, he's had a lot of successes along the way, but he had some failures along the way. But he didn't give up. He didn't quit. In 2018, when he lost his crop, he might have wanted to say, "All right, I'm done," but he didn't. He said, "All right, this is a lesson learned." And he even said this was preventable, right? So I want you to take from this along the way in your journey, no matter if you're growing grapes or if you're the sanitation worker, if you are in any area in the hospital, your school teacher, whatever, you're going to have some challenges along the way. But what you have to do is learn from those experiences and continue to press forward, because on the other side of that bad thing, greatness awaits. So you keep going and keep going and keep going. So I'm glad you tied that in, Mark. I truly appreciate that.
So Mother Nature can teach some harsh lessons, but Mother Nature also gives you the opportunity to start all over again the next year. So even nature understands that if you have a bad year, it doesn't mean it's the end. There's always next year, and you can always start from scratch, and you can always start all over again, and that's exactly how it works.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to say a shout out to all the folks at the doctors and nurses and the teams over at Lake Charles Memorial and Christus St. Patrick's Hospital who's tuned in tonight, listening to the show. We thank you for tuning in. We thank everyone for tuning in, but I just wanted to give a shout out to them because they're loyal supporters of the show. So thank you for that. You know, Mark, when you think about a mentor for this, and I know you talked about a couple of people who have helped you along the way, but one of the things that I've seen a lot of pictures of you that you shared of people coming in and helping with, whether it was building a fence that you were putting up, whether it was planting or pulling the grapes, and I saw all the big buckets, I guess, if you will, of
Yeah,
grapes.
yeah, yeah. The
Some
harvest
really
bins.
big buckets
Yes.
of grapes,
Yeah.
right? So all of those people, I would imagine that at some point in your career, whether that's whether you were in the military or at A&M or even in your working career, you've had some impact or influence with all of those people, right? Not necessarily that they work for you, but you had some influence with those people because, like you said, you put out an email and they come, right? So talk to the power of influencing people in a positive way, and how that in turn helps them want to add value back to you when you put out a message that, hey, I need some help with something.
Yeah, Cedric, this is a very important topic for me. I actually even wrote about it in my book, and it's the value of building a network. And if you recall from my book, they tried to teach us at A&M in the Corps to shake everybody's hand and to remember everybody's name. And there were 2,000 cadets in the Corps, and I can't tell you how many times that I would think back to had I understood how powerful that was at the time that I was doing it, I would have paid more attention to it. I would have remembered everybody's name. I would have shook everybody's hand, and I would have remembered. It didn't take me until I was well down the path of my career before it really started to come into focus for me how important and how powerful your network can become, not just for you, but for everybody that's in that network. Um, you hear a lot in the United States about diversity and our need to understand each other better. And I think that I've learned that's really critical. I mean, everybody brings something different to the party, and if you'll take a deep breath and shut your mouth and open your ears and listen to what people I can't tell you how many times, Cedric, on this wine journey, where I've had people tell me, "Hey, Mark, I see what you're doing here, but have you ever thought about doing it this way?" And it'll stop me in my tracks, and I'll think to myself, "Wow, that's clever." And I got to be honest with you, Cedric, I wasn't always that way. I mean, in my early part of my career, I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I didn't feel like I needed to hear what other people had to say. But especially along this journey, and even in the later parts of my career, I started to realize how important it was to just listen to what other people have to say. I'll give you another great example of that. I bought a prefab garage to build into my winery. So they delivered to my property, and it was just a bunch of studs with some wallboard on it. And I asked my friend group if people would be willing to come down and help me to build out that building and run power and water to it, and one of my friends, a fellow named Joe Snellick, volunteered, and Joe is the most handyman guy that I've ever met, and I kind of had a feel for that because I'd known him for 10 years. But during the 3 days that he was down helping, I I had my eyes peeled back by just how much he knew. I mean, I only scratched the surface in the previous 10 years of what this guy knew and understood and could contribute. So, it just reinforces every day that goes by, kind of reinforces that if you take the time to ask people about their experiences and about the things they like and about the things that are important to them, you might learn something from that. I've certainly learned a ton. I'm going to leave you with one more example of how you can learn stuff by just getting to know people. So my son-in-law, had a group of his friends down to our property to go dove hunting, and I'm not a big hunter, so I went one day, and then the second day I decided I was just going to hang out and make food for everybody. And this one fellow, a young man who was a friend of my son-in-law's, he said, Mark, if you're going to stay, I'll stay with you. And I go, hey, you don't have to do that. But he wanted to, he insisted. And so we spent the day getting to know each other. And it was fantastic. I learned so much about this fella and about his experience. And I learned one thing that's going to help me with my vineyard. In the course of the conversation, where'd you grow up, all this other stuff. Well, his parents owned a palm tree farm, of all things, in Florida. So he grew up in a family of farmers. And one of his 4-H programs, he sells real estate now, but one of his 4-H programs when he was a kid was he grew his own watermelons. And he had a ton of problems with deer getting into his watermelon patch and stomping on the watermelons and eating the watermelons. And he's telling me the story, and I'm going, well, man, I got a huge deer problem too. I mean, I can't keep the deer out of my vineyard. And he goes, well, I'll tell you what you need to do. And you're not going to believe this. He goes, some old farmer told me that if you use human hair and put it into a perforated bag and put it around the outside of your watermelon patch, the deer will smell the human from the hair and they won't go in it. And I go, you got to be kidding me. There's no way that works. And he goes, no, I'm telling you, it's going to work. So I'm about to go to our local barbers and ask them to start saving hair clippings for me so I can put them in a bag and put them around my vineyard so I can keep the deer out. So that's just an example of what you can learn if you just spend time with somebody.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, folks, and because I hear this a lot, Mark, when I go into companies and they'll say, in fact, a guy just told me this yesterday. He goes, look, I'm a leader here, but I have a lot of people that are on my team that are older than me. And I don't know that I can lead them. And I said, well, wait a minute. Age is not a precursor of whether you can lead or be led, right? So I say that to you, it's just the opposite, right? You can learn something from someone that's younger than you.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You talk all the time about the value of mentorships. My next door neighbor down at our property is a retired oil executive. And I've learned so much about farming by just talking over the fence to this guy and just being curious. And it's amazing how much he's willing to share and how much he's willing to help. And it's just it just goes back to what I've been talking about all along, which is the value of having a big group, a big network, and not being afraid to leverage it. Be curious, ask questions, reach out, and then listen. Hear what they have to say, and you'll if you're like me, you'll be very, very appreciative of what you learn from all of that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, folks, we are talking to Mark Smits, the owner of Desperado Wines, and we have a few minutes left. But I want to make sure that you understand and know where to order his wines from. In the scrolling across the screen, we put the website. We've also put it in the chat to make it a little bit easier. You can copy and paste it and go right to his website to purchase Desperado wines. And we want you to reach out and support his business. So, Mark, are you at a point where you're going to, or will you get to a point where you want to start doing vineyard tours? People go to California, to Napa Valley, and all these places. Are you at a point where you're going to be doing something like that?
Cedric, my family and I have talked a number of times about opening up our property for guests and putting it up on VRBO or doing something like that. And I'm very interested in doing that. I have to overcome some obstacles. The first obstacle is our property needs a little bit of a facelift. I don't know. I mean, it's nice by rural Texas standards, but it needs a facelift a little bit. And then the bigger obstacle that I have is, I always found it fascinating when people in my past would tell me, "Oh, I live in the middle of nowhere," and I would go, I don't, it can't be as bad as you're saying." Well, Cedric, my property is in the middle of nowhere. It's a 2.5 mile drive down a dirt road just to get to the 1 mile dirt road that gets to our gate. I mean, so it's in the middle of nowhere. And so if I do start to do tours and that kind of thing, I think the way that I need to think about doing this is for groups. So if somebody has a church group, or if somebody has a work group and they want to do a retreat, or if they want to do a tour of some type, then I'd be happy to help organize something. We do have some really nice features to our property, in the fact that there's an open pavilion that is a nice place. And of course, if you come when the grapes are growing in the April-May timeframe, it's a beautiful experience to walk through the 2 acres of the vineyard. We could do a wine tasting. So there are things I can do, but I think the best way for me to do this is if somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, I'd like to do a family thing, or I'd like to do kind of a church retreat," then I can share information and pictures and that kind of stuff. I think that's the best way for me to do this at this time.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Now that sounds good. I know my son and he's tuned in tonight. He is a wine drinker as well, and my wife and I are not necessarily wine drinkers, but and we have all of these wines here, and he said his job was going to be to drink up all the different wines that we have. So but he wants to. He said, "Dad, we ought to go," because I was telling him about you going to be on the show. He said, "We ought to go out there." So one of these days when he's back, and he's in North Dakota, when he's back in town, I might have to call you and say, "Hey, let's see if we can go and visit." He wants to check that out.
Well, Missy and I love entertaining, and we love sharing our place with our friends. And I invite anybody who's interested in learning more about it. If you just reach out to me, I will make accommodations, and I would love to have you and your family, Cedric. It'd be awesome.
Awesome. So I see Mr. Jack Kinney is tuned in as well. He said Mark should be drinking some of his wine. So Mark, you have a glass of your wine, right? I have it's a glass of tea, folks. It's the closest I'm going to get to.
I thought you guys would appreciate me not slurring my words while I was being interviewed, so I was going to just wait until the very end. But I do have it. Jack, I'll take a sip of it right now for you. Awesome.
So, Mark, give us before we close out here. Give us what is one of your biggest eye openers that you realized after you started this process?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I've had so many eye openers. Um, well, okay, so here's a good one for you, Cedric. So when Missy and I started the winemaking process, um, and we still very much subscribe to this, we wanted to make wine that is in its simplest form. In other words, uh, yeast and grape juice. There are lots of other remedies that you can add to wine to solve problems. But if you do everything right from the first part of it, then hopefully you won't have problems and you won't have to add any other ingredients. And to Missy and I, the baseline that we were hoping to achieve is we just wanted grape juice and yeast. And I'm happy to report that so far so good. That is for the most part. We added a little bit of a de-acidification to our rosé wine, but other than that, it's the only ingredients are grape juice and yeast, and one other important ingredient that almost every wine in the United States has, and that's sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is used in wine making, and I'm telling a very small amount, like depending on the pH, like 20 parts per million. Parts per million. So it's a very small amount.
Yeah.
And it's used in winemaking for two things. First, it stops the fermentation. It deactivates the yeast. And then the second thing that it does is it protects the wine against bacteria and other bad things. So if you look at any label in the United States on a wine, it's gonna if it's got greater than 20 parts per. I think if it has less than 20 parts per million, you don't have to put anything on the label. But if it has anything greater than 20 parts per million, you have to include on your label that it contains sulfites. Okay, so biggest eye opener. I told you about my. I'm not a real chemist, so the first grape that we were fermenting was the Carmenera grape that went into this. And I was only off by 1 decimal point on the amount of sulfur dioxide that I was adding to this. But the bottom line is I had way too much sulfites in this Carmenera when I made that math error. And it sent Missy and I into a tailspin for a good 48 hours as we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do to fix that? And as a guy who's thinking, I just ruined this and I got to wait a whole year to do it all over again if there's no way out. And then a good 48 hours into it, Missy and I decided to just add our our Lenoir grapes to the Carmenera grapes, and we can dilute the amount of sulfite by just doubling the volume of wine. And so that's how we ended up with this blend, is by accident to solve a problem. And so my biggest eye opener, Cedric, is that, and man, I hear you talk about it all the time, and that is, even if you make a mistake, and this was a big mistake, even if you make a mistake, if you just think about it and don't panic and leverage the knowledge that's out there, you can fix anything. And I've gotten more positive feedback on this blend than anything. And by the way, the sulfite is way within limits now because we just diluted it. But that's the biggest eye opener I've had. Is I spent the first couple of years, every time something bad would happen or an error was made, I'd spend the first couple of years going, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? And now, after doing this for a while, it's like, hey, bring it on. I'll figure something out. And we'll work with it. So that's the biggest eye opener for me.
Okay, you make a mistake and say, "Oh, we've just hit on something that everyone's gonna like."
Well, yeah. Oh, so I don't know if Pat and Karen are listening, but Pat Hale has he when I called him when I made this mistake with the sulfite, and you know, the blend was one of his suggestions as well. But he's, you know, all winemakers are going to run into things where they make a mistake and they have to do some kind of correction. And again, you know, your goal as a winemaker is not to let that happen, but I mean, life happens and
Right.
so Pat has a white wine that he added jalapeno. He infused it with jalapeno.
Oh wow.
He didn't like the way it was turning out. They were doing some experimentation, and I think he calls it Texas Tornado is how he describes it. But it's a jalapeno infused white wine, and it's his bestseller. And he did that to, you know, again, to try to make something that he wasn't satisfied with better, and he ended up hitting a home run. So, you know, you talk about it all the time. It's no matter what life, you know, deals to you, you know, make lemonade out of lemons, and you definitely learn that if you didn't know it already when you're in the farming business.
Absolutely, absolutely. You learn that, and actually, I was smiling as well when you were talking about the label. I remember when I was in global marketing, and I had to go to the label maker for one of the Axum reagents, right? So I was thinking about that. I said, "Oh, Mark probably thought he was leaving all that behind when he left global marketing."
No, again, Cedric, it's been an incredible journey. I mean, so when you look at this bottle of wine, I mean, all of this was created by Missy and I. So finding the source for the cork, and again, help with Pat and other sources to point us in the right direction. But I learned the process. You know, we used to get frustrated at Abbott because somebody in regulatory would tell us we don't have the labels approved yet by the federal government. Well, now I know what it's like to have to deal with the federal government to get the label approved. So I should have been kinder back in the day when they were telling me they were having a problem.
Yes, different perspective, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So, folks, I hope you learned a lot tonight. I know that I learned a lot more about the winemaking process, and it's been enjoyable being on this side of the mic. So hopefully you learned a lot as well. Mark, I want to thank you again for making your second appearance on the show and bringing this information about Desperado wines to our listeners. I totally appreciate it.
Hey, Cedric, thank you very much. I love the work that you're doing, and I appreciate your friendship. And it's a real honor to get to spend the time with you and your viewers and your group. So thank you very much for thinking about me.
Awesome. So, folks, I want to tell you that not tomorrow, but next Monday on Talk Leadership with Cedrick, we will have another leader on, and we will be introducing his new book. Mr. Joe Nimmers will be on the show, and he has a new book coming out, 30 Observations of Leadership. And let me tell you what, folks, it's going to be a great book. So definitely want you to tune in next Monday night at 6:30 Central Time. And I'm going to give a toast to Mark Smits. I'm in my fasting, so I'm not drinking, but I do have a glass of tea. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Cedric. I appreciate it. And thank you to everybody that dialed in.
Absolutely. So thank you, guys. Good night. Go to Desperado Wines and buy you some wine and enjoy it. So as I always tell you when I end the show, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and don't be on the menu.